Sita Karat, Chairperson of the People Solidarity and Education Tours.
A blessed and meaningful day to all of us gathered in this virtual meeting and tour of a community garden in an urban poor community in Metro Manila. I would like especially to express my great appreciation to our staff and colleagues in PISET who, despite the crisis we are all facing due to this prolonged pandemic, have been able to organize a virtual tour of an urban poor community. This is in pursuit of our long-standing commitment to raise the awareness of our brothers and sisters in the Philippines and abroad on the roots of poverty and to inspire them to participate in the struggle for justice and liberation, the only course towards the well-being of the suffering poor. I especially congratulate our dedicated staff and community organizers for your creativity and resolution to come up with a viable alternative to our usual solidarity tours for foreign students and youth, which, because of the COVID crisis, cannot be properly undertaken and hence suspended for the time being. I would also like to give tribute to our partners in urban poor communities for their unrelenting devotion to the cause of people's empowerment in the continuing struggle for social, political, and ecological justice, which can only inspire more people to participate in the people's struggle. Indeed, the overwhelming problems and issues confronting our urban poor communities, hunger, lack of employment, poor education, inferior sanitation and health facilities, have been seriously aggravated by the current pandemic. Yet, our urban poor partners have remained constant and resolute in their prolonged and danger-filled journey towards the land of justice, peace, and integrity of creation. They have been a continuing source of strength, courage, and inspiration for their partners in the Philippines and abroad. In today's virtual tour, we will be visiting a community garden amid an urban poor community which has long been confronted with overwhelming problems of poverty and social marginalization that can only be aggravated by the ongoing pandemic. Yet, they continue to carry on, overcoming all obstructions that stand in the way of their well-being, finding and developing creative alternatives that will respond to our people's hunger for social and economic justice, sustain life, and promote the integrity of creation. Particularly inspiring is their no mean effort to develop a community garden in the midst of the pandemic, an awe-inspiring initiative that may well be emulated by other impoverished and hunger-threatened communities here in the Philippines and abroad. Not only does it respond to the immediate problem of food and sustenance suffered by the poor and the deprived, it also heightens the sense of community, cooperation, and solidarity among our impoverished brothers and sisters. It is this unflagging solidarity and cooperation, local, national, and international, in the struggle for justice and peace that may yet bring about the liberation of the oppressed, as well as the realization of social, economic, and ecological justice, which sums up the very core of PISET's mission and goals. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you. And I hope the initial conversation on this very important issue will spur continuing conversations and debates among our people in different parts of the community.
Thank you, Ms. Carbencita Karagdag Peralta. So, as some of you may know, we have been conducting the Solidarity Tours, of course, with students and other people going here to the Philippines and experiencing the life here in the Philippines. But now, as what Ms. Carmencita mentioned, we're doing this virtually because of the COVID situation. But nevertheless, welcome to our first virtual tour. This is called TANIMANG BAYAN, Reclaiming Spaces Through Urban Farming. So to give you a teaser of the Solidarity Tours, here is a short video. So as you can see, those are some of the clips that we've had during our past Solidarity Tours, and hopefully this pandemic will end and we can go back to that way again. Speaking of the pandemic, to give us a general situation of the pandemic, we're calling Casey Salamanca of Ibon Foundation.
Good
Good
morning,
morning,
everyone.
everyone.
Can I request the tech team for screen sharing privileges? Hmm. So again, good evening to all our friends abroad and good morning to everyone here in the Philippines. I'm Casey from Ibon Foundation. We are a research institution focusing on the socioeconomic topics and issues here in the Philippines. We were invited to discuss today the national situation, giving context to the general situation of that the country is facing during these times. And it has been more than a year since the COVID-19 pandemic affected the whole world, and governments handled it differently, and results have been uneven, not just between developed and developing countries, but also between developing countries. For instance, in Southeast Asia, the Philippines has among the most stringent COVID response to the pandemic in terms of limiting gatherings and movement. However, this has been ineffective and eventually a wasted opportunity given the government's failure to strengthen the public health service. Its health and income support are measly compared to the enormity of the public health crisis. And after a number of month-long lockdowns, the country's long-neglected healthcare system is almost at its limit, with daily new cases reaching the 20,000 mark and active cases at more than 150,000. The health crisis also affected the country's economy. Its GDP growth rate plunged to negative 9.5% in 2020. This is the highest economic contraction in the country's recorded history, lower than the previous economic crisis and even lower than what was recorded after the assassination of former Senator Aquino during the martial law in the late 1980s. But it is important to note that even before the pandemic, the country's economic growth has already been slowing. Also, this pre-pandemic economic quote-unquote growth is not actually due to strong domestic economy, but mostly because of volatile factors like OFW remittances or overseas Filipino workers remittances, the business process outsourcing industry, and the unsustainable service sector. 4 decades of neoliberal globalization has kept the country underdeveloped with a very weak industry and agricultural sector. The falling share of manufacturing is the biggest factor in general economic decline since the 1980s, and the country became a service economy more than a producing economy. The Philippines has been highly dependent on foreign capital and has served as its source of raw materials, cheap labor, and market for surplus goods. But what is good for foreign investment is not necessarily good for the economy. And the country has been opening up the foreign trade and investments for decades, and the poor economic results speak for themselves. There is nothing to indicate that foreign direct investments and globalization policies have contributed to creating a strong domestic economy that creates jobs on a sustainable basis. This slide shows the changing shape of our economy since the 1940s. The long-term adverse structural shifts are even clearer. There is a sudden drastic collapse in production, seen by the blue line in the graph, especially reversal in manufacturing on top of steady agricultural decline. So this prevents national industrialization and prevents agricultural development. There is also a sudden shift to services, a perceptible increase in utilities and in extractives. So decline is most of all explained by the economic policy shifts since the late 1970s. In particular, the start of neoliberal globalization and its continuation and deepening in subsequent decades. This includes the IMF stabilization and macro fiscal and financial policies in 1962, the World Bank structural adjustment in 1979 to aggressively shape the real economy, which initiated trade and investment liberalization, then eventually privatization and deregulation. And in 1994, the World Trade Organization accession and consolidation of free market-based policies, of which the good governance is an integral part. This next slide, This next slide shows the number of neoliberal policies, laws, and agreements made in the past decades in the country. This supports the backwardness of the economy and turning away from genuine economic development. So clearly, the underdevelopment of the Philippines is a policy choice made by its government. And the people are left to bear the brunt of these policy choices. Not enough jobs are being generated domestically. And this has worsened under the Duterte administration, which saw the worst job generation in post-Marcos period. And even in years where supposed economic growth is recorded, employment growth goes in the opposite direction. And this jobs crisis, of course, worsened with the pandemic onslaught. Philippines registered the biggest drop in employment and the biggest increase in unemployment in the Southeast Asian region. For the employed population, wages remain low and fails to meet a family's basic need. For the National Capital Region's minimum wage of 537 pesos, or um, more or less $11, is more or less just half of what a family of 5 needs in the region in order to live decently. And wage hikes under this administration is not a top priority. In fact, the real value of wage in the country even fell by 7.2% under this administration. And without sustainable jobs with meaningful wages, poverty remains widespread. 3 million Filipino families, or 17.7 million Filipinos, survive at 71 pesos or less per day. This poverty threshold is the official value used by the government to count the income poor in the country. And it is a very low threshold at only around $1.50. And we can just imagine what kind of lives 17.7 million of poor Filipinos lead. Still, raising the threshold to 132 pesos, or around $2.64, will give us 62 million poor Filipinos. So to visualize the magnitude of poverty in the country, the official population of the Philippines, according to the 2020 national census, is at 109 million. So that would equate to more than half of the country's population living in poverty. By the end of 2020, 3 of 4 families didn't have savings. So the savings of 3.2 million families were wiped out last year. Put in another way, some 18.6 million families are completely dependent on their daily incomes or debt. 6 out of 10 families went hungry last year. Not surprisingly, wealth gaps in the country are only getting bigger. The richest 50 Filipinos have more wealth than the poorest 60 to 70 million Filipinos combined. Now, this could not be said to just happen naturally or spontaneously, or because some are hardworking with sipag and tiyaga, while others are just too lazy. This kind of huge structural problem is a matter of constant political choice, or to put it simply, of bad economic leadership that's for a few rather than for the people. And this kind of gap also manifests on COVID prevention measures. The lockdown and staying at home is much more cramped for the poor than the rich. Just to give you an idea, a parking space measures 12 square meters, and around 50%, or 48% to be exact, of homes in the National Capital Region have a floor area of 29 square meters or less. That is smaller than 2.5 parking spaces. And the smallest homes of poorest families have just 9 square meters or less, smaller than a parking space. Meanwhile, we have the homes of the wealthiest Filipinos that have a floor areas of 2,000 square meters or more. So in contrast, each individual rich person has a living space that is on average as big or bigger than the entire homes of the poorest have. And speaking of parking spaces, just a little trivia. Parking slots in the Philippines, or in the region in Metro Manila, actually earn more than a minimum wage earner. Parking fees in Metro Manila can apparently be up to 700 pesos or more per day, versus the National Capital Region's minimum wage of 537 pesos. People say that calamities and crises are a great equalizer, that no one is spared and everyone is affected. But in reality, though we are on the same storm, we are actually riding different types of boats. And while some of us can recover quickly, most cannot. In one study, it is said that the 50 richest Filipinos will only need 9 months to recover their lost income during the pandemic, but it will take a decade for the poor Filipinos to just be able to return to their 2019 economic status. So clearly, a change in the way things are, a change in the system is very much needed. And proposals for such are not lacking. So from alternatives to anti-poverty policy of the government, to a proposal for an economic framework that is counter to neoliberalism, to compiled and filed demands from various people's organizations, and even an alternative from the revolutionary movement pushed during the peace talks. All of these are doable alternatives from various sectors of the country, but sadly, we're still fighting to make them real. For long-term development to happen, um, these proposals actually includes the push for development of the national economy. Also, it proposes that economic gains be distributed equitably, and social service and protection should be ensured. And lastly, governance should be democratic and accountable. The economy should serve the needs of the people, and for this to happen, a leadership buy-in for the people is needed. Not surprisingly, the idea of change is unwelcomed for those who have so much to lose. So the administration's authoritarian rule has served to preserve the anti-people, pro-rich economic framework of neoliberalism, and also to maintain itself on the seat of power. The Duterte administration is infamous as a leader with no regard to human rights. It has taken the lives of many through its war on drugs and war on dissent. It has used its position to intimidate and sow fear among its political rivals and even the mass media. It has weaponized the law against its critics and everyone pushing for change. The Duterte administration has been able to maintain itself by buying the loyalty of the police and the military force by increasing their salaries and providing various incentives. It has also militarized the civilian government by appointing a number of retired generals in various positions. For example, um, leading the COVID-19 response, the task force for the COVID-19 response in the country is actually composed mostly of retired generals. Our um, Secretary of the Social Welfare and Development is a retired general. Um, the official leading the vaccination program in the country is also a retired general, among others. Its foreign policy also remains subservient to imperialist power, which is the United States. He is using the country's sovereignty as a bargaining chip to ensure more gains for him and his clique. So his President Duterte is actually playing the US and China cards to ensure that he gains from this transaction. But despite of all these attacks and also crises, still the people march on. So amidst all the crises, there is a bright ray of hope coming from the people. So with the government's failure to address the pandemic, the people are acting. Efforts proving that they can govern and provide genuine service to the community can be found all over the country. From TANIMANG bayan or community farms to community pantries and community kitchens. They are also doing this simultaneously with continuous demand for accountability and change. Um, So as we can see, seeds of change are being sown everywhere, but we have to collectively tend to it, to let it grow and protect it from pests who try to destroy our unity and resolve. That is all, and thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Some people in the audience are asking for the slides. Is it
Ah, yes, I've already sent a copy to the organizer, so I think they will be facilitating sending out the copies of these slides.
Okay. Thank you, Casey, for that very informative overview of the general pandemic situation here in the Philippines. And to talk about the situation of the urban poor, we have Michael Beltran of Kadamay.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint, but I do have some talking points. And I just want to give a brief overview of the urban poor situation, mainly on how urban poor Filipinos are under attack economically and politically by the Duterte regime. First off, especially since I think since Sitio San Roque could be a crucial part of the discussion. um, the demolitions or worldwide, it's more common to call them evictions, or basically the widespread tearing down of homes and evicting people from their dwellings. It hasn't stopped during the pandemic. Um, Even prior to the pandemic, under the Duterte administration program of the Build, 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 which is a aggressive infrastructure program, the the administration targets around 500,000 Filipino families to lose their homes before Duterte's term ends. And that hasn't stopped. No, this drive hasn't stopped. Although we can say that because of the ineptitude and the incompetence of the Duterte administration, they haven't been able to evict as many people as they would like. Um, but still, even during the pandemic, where supposedly stay-at-home orders are supposed to be in place, um, the increasing of the homeless population has not stopped as the Duterte administration destroys more and more low-income houses. It of course increases the homeless population as well. Um, in April 2020, the DILG, or the Department of Interior and Local Government, released an order suspending all eviction operations for at least until September of this year, the minimum. So that was supposed to be more than 1 year of a moratorium on all types of evictions nationwide, which didn't happen. And in fact, in March of this year, of 2021, to I guess avoid the embarrassment of being called out on going back on their own policies, um, they suspended their own policy. They backtracked and they lifted this suspension order on eviction. So that means that concretely they allowed themselves to evict more people during this time when more people are getting sick and more people are getting hungry because of the lack of aid and lack of economic assistance. Concretely, around 400 that Kadamay knows of, around 400 or more than almost 500 homes were destroyed last year, and this year alone, we tallied that just in Metro Manila and the surrounding provinces, there are around 50,000 Filipino homes that will be torn down before the year's end, if the government will have their way. So evictions is definitely the pandemic has not stopped this. In fact, it's only compounded the drive the um, of the capitalist and the government collaboration to expand its profits and put businesses or big businesses in place of low-income homes, and put businesses in place of social services like public housing. Um, at the same time, while Kadamay and the rest of the urban poor Filipinos face all of these attacks and evictions, there are of course um, many fascist attacks directed against Kadamay and a lot of activists in general. the one common tactic that the military uses, the military and police uses to subdue and um, to nullify activists in communities is to force them to pose as surrenderies of the NPA. Now, this is part of the program of the National Task Force to end the local communist armed conflict, or the NTF-LCAC. It's basically the military agency tasked with curbing and attacking the insurgency, but it's doing it through attacking legal organizations like Kadamay. And what they do is basically say that if you go to communities and tell people, especially organizers and mass activists, that none of you will receive aid unless you pose as members of the New People Army for our press conference or for our photo op. And that means that they're basically effectively surrendering as Kadamay members turned NPAs, and basically justifying the crackdown on activists on the part of the military war. They're exploiting the situation of extreme poverty um, to further their propaganda war against the opposition in the Philippines. This is not as happening in urban poor communities, but it's happening in a lot of marginalized communities as well. But I think um, Kadama is one of the organizations that had dealt with it firsthand for a long part of, not just during the pandemic, but even before the pandemic. And I think because the pandemic is such an economic, has also bared the economic crisis so much that it also emboldens the military to do such things against the poor. Aside from that, of course, I say of course, but it's because it's happening everywhere. A bunch of urban poor organizers have also been arrested during this pandemic, and it's eerily and strikingly similar to a lot of the arrests committed during the pandemic and under the Duterte administration, wherein activists are arrested with planted evidence, told that they are charged with possession of illegal firearms and explosives, and of course, the legal processes in effect are delayed. One urban poor advocate and peasant organizer, Amanda Echanis, last December 2020 was arrested with her child, with her newborn baby, while she was in the community, and she's still in jail up until now. But her case is also a symptom of how it's also a reflection of how she, in her words, she didn't have any baby Armalites. She only had a baby, and the military accuses her of having grenades and bombs and explosives while holding her newborn. So it's a very ridiculous case, but you can see how her detention is a symptom of the administration's insistence that all activists are basically terrorists. Concretely, also in the military document, one of the military documents that we have been publicly shown, Kadamay is directly labeled as a terrorist organization with its activities and its actions. Also, directly tagged and labeled as terrorist actions. Therefore, any attack or any form of repression against Kadamay by the military is considered justifiable in the eyes of the government. That means that a lot of Kadamay members, organizers are very, very vulnerable to all sorts of attacks, harassment, intimidation, arrests, and killings. Our last year, on May 26, our National Secretary General, Carlito Badjon, who has been one of the faces of Kadamay for so long, was murdered while he was sleeping in his home province in Leyte. And the police have still tried to cover it up and try to make it look as if it was a local scuffle that got him murdered. But he was being red tagged or being labeled as a communist and terrorist for so long up until his death. And right now, one of the big opposition campaigns that Kadamay is holding, and one of the big opposition campaigns that are getting us more and more red tagged and more which is irritating the Duterte administration even more, is the campaign for financial assistance or economic aid. Colloquially, it's called ayuda, or just aid. Kadamay has been calling for 10,000 pesos in economic aid for every month that the pandemic is in effect, that the pandemic has not been resolved. And this is because even the administration admits that a family needs at least 10,000 pesos to live and to acquire its basic needs. And many families during the pandemic have lost their livelihoods. And we have, like as what Casey discussed, we have one of the highest jobless rates and the unemployment rates in the country at the moment. I just want to highlight that
Michael, I think Michael, I think your video stopped. Michael. Michael, your video and presentation stopped. Okay. So I think Michael's signal was not able to come through. Let's give him a few minutes. I can see he's still here in the list of participants. Okay. And now he's not. Okay. Nevertheless, Michael gave us a very concise pointers on the situation of the urban poor in the Philippines, citing all these attacks from the state and how the state have been making it hard for the urban poor to survive. And to give us a virtual experience of the urban poor, we have a virtual tour of San Roque, an urban poor community in Quezon City, NCR. I think we can proceed with that since I think Michael is not able to reconnect. Tech team. So yeah, so to see the status of San Roque, an urban poor community in Quezon City, here's a video. And of course, after that, we're also going to talk about the status of their communal garden and other community projects such as Escuela Meralita. And we are going to talk to the locals for an update on the community. Yeah.
Nung bago po pandemic ay medyo mahirap na po talaga. Kailangan po talaga magsipag ka, matuto ka sa hanap buhay. Ano
Hello, tech team. Your
Sorry,
video
I'll
up.
just set up the subtitles.
Okay. Thank you.
Nung bago po pandemic, ay medyo mahirap na po talaga. Kailangan po talaga magsipag ka, matuto ka sa hanap buhay. Ano man ang pwede mong itinda, ano man ang pwede mong pagkakitaan, at basta marangal, ay mabubuhay ka po. Pero nang dahil nga po sa pandemic na biglaan na dumating sa ating bansa, doon na po nagsimula na naghirap po ang buong Pilipinas, o lalong-lalo na dito sa San Roque. Wala na po talagang makain. Mahirap na po na walang pandemic noon. Mas mahirap po lalo-lalo na nang dumating na pandemic sa ating bansa. Kaya po naprogramahan yung Taniman Bayan dahil ito po ay malaking tulong sa aming komunidad.
Hello, ako si Jelay at isa akong ilustrador at nagtatrabaho ako sa isang children's book publishing house. At sasama ako sa munting exposure trip sa San Roque ngayon. Dito yung first time na pupunta ako sa San Roque. Nakapunta na ako doon noong 2013. Time na yun, pinapatupad na yung pagpapatayo ng QCCBD o Quezon City Central Business District. Dahil first time ko yung pupunta sa community at may mangyayari na demolition, medyo nakatakot siya na experience para sa akin. Hindi ko alam yung mangyayari, ganun. Nung pinansin ko yung mga taga San Roque, alam na nila yung gagawin nila. Handa na silang humarap dun sa demolition team. Handa silang magbarikada, ganyan. Meron silang plano, paano ipagtatanggol yung sarili nila at yung mga bahay nila. So, mafe-feel mo yung tapang nila, no? Pero, inisip ko rin parang kung ilalagay ko yung sarili ko dun sa lugar nila, kahit siguro sa mga karaniwang araw, hindi mawawala, mayroon pa rin takot Kasi hindi mo alam kung hanggang kailan ka may bahay, di ba? Sa isang iglap lang, maaaring andyan na yung demolition team, pabaklasin na yung mga pader mo, yung bubong mo. Saan ka na lang pupunta?
Ayun, so ngayon samahan niyo naman akong pumasyal virtually sa San Roque para alamin kung kumusta na ba yung mga residente, makipagkwentuhan sa kanila, at alamin kung ano na bang kalagayan nila ngayong may pandemya.
Magandang umaga po. Ako po si Ate Marilyn, dito po sa San Roque. Residente din po ng San Roque sa Area J. Dati po malapit po ako sa MRT nagtatrabaho, doon po sa kantin. So, doon po sa pinanggalingan ko, napakamahal po ng upa ng bahay. So, nabalitaan ko po dito, may mga nagre-renta na mura lang. Nung dumating po ako dito, ay marami na pong nagiba na bahay, marami na pong nagsilikas, kasi gawa na po noong 2010 na nagsimula ng demolisyon, kaguluhan doon sa EDSA, na biglang dumating ang mga demolition team, at maraming bahay ang mga nasira. Kaya napilitan ng mga residente na lumikas sa malalayong relokasyon. Tapos nung pagdating ko nga po dito, nag-i-start na po sila ng mga NHA na nag-iikot na kailangan na rin pong lisanin yung mga bahay na doon sa area J na kailangan na daw po at priority area. Hanggang sa pumasok po ako sa organisasyon ng Kadamay. Ang organisasyon po namin ay minulat po kami. Kung nalaman po namin kung ano yung mga karapatan namin na hindi kami pwedeng basta-basta paalisin, lalo na kung 5 years ka na naninirahan dito sa komunidad. Na kailangan itumindig, na hindi kailangan umasa sa NHA o sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno na tutulungan kami at itatapon naman kami sa malalayong relokasyon. Karamihan po dito, mga nagtatrabaho lang po sa mga building, sabihin sa construction, lalo-lalo na po sa mga nagtitinda na manininda na mga vendors. Naapektuhan po talaga ng nag-lockdown ng 1 buwan at kalahati. Halos yung iba ay wala na po talagang makain. Ang nagbigay ng ayuda ang barangay, isang beses lang po sa loob ng isang buwan. So paano po pagkakasyahin yun dahil nga po bawal lumabas. Kaya po hindi po maiwasan ng mga tao na kahit taya ang kanilang kalusugan dahil nga po ang COVID ay hindi naman nakikita. Pero sinasapalaran po nila, lumalabas sila sa komunidad para po maghanap buhay, magtinda ng basahan, magtinda ng tubig, magtinda ng sampagita, para lang po kumita ng kaunti at para may pakain sa mga anak na nila na nagugutom. Kung mahirap na po na walang pandemic noon, mas mahirap po lalo-lalo na nang dumating na pandemic sa ating bansa. Kaya po naprogramahan yung Taniman Bayan dahil ito po ay malaking tulong sa aming komunidad. Napakalaking tulong po. Dahil po, imbis na ibibili mo ng pechay, 10 pisong pechay, ganyang kapiraso. Samantala, sa loob ng komunidad namin ay meron ka mahihinga ng sariwa, organic na gulay.
Hi, magandang buhay. Ako pala si Ate Jeline, ang residente ng sitio San Roque. Nasimulan namin yung Tanimang Bayan. Dito kasi sa sitio San Roque, mayroong programa yung SIB San Roque Alliance, yung Kusinang Bayan. So naisip namin na magtayo rin ng taniman kasi doon sana kami kukuha ng isusustento doon sa Kusinang Bayan. Pidami naming hirap bago kami makapaggawa ng Tanimang Bayan dahil pinipigilan kami, pinagbabawalan kaming gumawa, pinagdadamutan kami ng lupa. Bawal daw kasi doon sa area na yon gumawa ng taniman dahil gagawin daw na kalsada. So naisip namin na mas importante pa ba yung kalsada kaysa Tanimang Bayan? Ng Tanimang Bayan, lahat makikinabang at ang nakatanim sa Tanimang Bayan ay yung panglaman ng tiyan. Yung problema talaga namin dyan sa taniman, yung lupa eh. Pinagdadamutan kasi kami ng Ayala NHA, pero gumagawa naman kami ng paraan para magamit namin yung lupa. Kasi sayang yung lupa eh. Yan na talaga ang problema namin, yung lupa. Problema din namin sa tubig. Yung tubig kasi dyan, negosyo. Galing siya nawasa, submeter na lang. So, ang per cubic kasi na bumabagsak sa amin is 100 eh. Negosyo na po kasi. May tumulong naman sa amin yung Propel na discover yung sapat. Kung pwede siya magamit, hindi lamang sa taniman, kundi isusuporta sa lahat dyan sa komunidad. Gumagawa kami ng organic namin na fertilizer. Nanghingi kami ng saging sa mga vendors, yung mga pabulok na hindi na nila maibibenta. Iniipon namin yan. Bili kami ng asukal, tapos kung ilan yung saging, ilang kilo yung saging, ganun din yung asukal. Tapos durugin siya, takpan dun sa timba, tapos balot ng telang puti or na malinis. Tapos bilang ka ng 7 days, tapos pwede na siyang harvestin. Tapos yun yung hinahalo namin sa tubig para idilig sa mga gulay. Yung na-harvest kasi namin dyan, hindi naman yun sa pansarili lang namin eh. Kundi lahat ng tao sa komunidad, nakakaani, nabibigyan namin yun, napaghati-hatian namin yun. Para sa mga taong nakikiisa sa laban namin sa sitio San Roque. Hindi lang to laban namin, kundi laban ng marilitang lungsod. Sana tulungan nyo kami sa aming mga programa, katulad ng Kusinang Bayan, Tanimang Bayan. Dahil ito naman dapat po talaga eh. Kasi sa panahon ngayon may pandemya. Wala pa pong mga trabaho. Meron man po tayong ayuda pero kulang at hindi sapat. Kaya kami, sama-sama kaming mga mahihirap. Kung gusto nyo rin pong mag-volunteer, willing naman po kaming tanggapin kayo. Tapos, sana tulungan nyo kami sa aming mga pangangailangan dito sa sitio San Roque. Hindi lang dito sa sitio San Roque, sana sa buong komunidad na mayroong Tanimang Bayan, may Kusinang Bayan, sana suportahan po natin to.
Okay, so that's a very brief experience video of Sitio San Roque. Of course, if our guests are in the Philippines, we know that you can experience more, see more. But since we are here in this situation, I hope that is enough for us to ask questions, to follow up, and to possibly help the community. And in the video, they talked about the Tanimang Bayan, the communal garden, and now we are going to discuss more about that. And of course, we are also going to discuss on other community projects such as the Eskwela Maralita, and of course, updates on the community. So to share about the status of the communal garden, to share about the status of Tanimang Bayan, Ate Jeline Rosillo is here to share her thoughts.
Sige na ba? Okay po, magandang umaga po sa lahat.
Good morning, magandang umaga, Ate Jeline. I believe we have translators, so Ate Jeline, dapat daw po magsalita ng 3 sentences para daw po ma-translate ng translator. 3 sentences din. Sige po, salamat. Okay,
Sige
Ate
po.
Jeline, start na po. Salamat.
Nagsimula po ang aming Tanimang Bayan noong pandemya, na kung saan kami din po sa komunidad ang kumikilos at namamahala nito.
Hi everyone, I'm Ralph from Save San Roque and I'll be translating for Jeline. So let's start. The Tanimang Bayan or Community Farm Initiative emerged during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The residents of the community, from mothers, fathers, and the youth, worked together in developing the idle plot of lands, converting them into fertile gardening grounds.
Katuwang namin ang mga kabataan sa pagbubungkal, paghahakot ng lupa, pag-aayos ng plat, at pagtatanim. Bali, nakaapat po kami ng pichay at ngayon po ang
Nakamute. Sorry. Okay. So as of now, the community has already had 4 harvest cycles of petchay, a type of bok choy, and currently they are growing eggplant, root crops, and okra.
Marami pong pamilya ang nakikinabang, hindi lamang kaming mga nasa organisasyon nito, kundi pati po ang buong komunidad nakikinabang din. Ang mga tanim po kasi naming mga gulay ay organic po. Bali, kami na lang po ang gumagawa ng mga
Okay, so each cycle, they get about 30 to 40 kilos of harvest, which they distribute not only within their organization, but also to other members of the community. The vegetables are organic and the residents themselves are the ones producing their fertilizers.
Sa gawain naman po, bali by chapter naman po ang kumikilos sa pagdidilig. Monday to Friday ang pag-iba-iba ng mga chapter. Saturday at Sunday, bali all fours po yun. Lalo na po pag may area kaming nabubuksan na magiging Tanimang Bayan.
In terms of distribution of labor, each community chapter are assigned a day of the week to water the crops. And then every weekend, they all gather together to work, especially when there are new areas in the community that will be converted to community farms.
Dati po, yung aming Tanimang Bayan ay dalawa lamang po. Pero ngayon, umaabot na po sa 5 area.
They started with 2 community
farms.
farms.
Po talaga sa Tanimang Bayan. Sige pa?
Sige, Ate Jeline, tuloy mo lang.
Mahalaga po talaga sa amin ang Tanimang Bayan. Dahil sa panahon po kasi ngayon, mahal po ang gulay at wala po pambili. Dahil karamihan po dito sa amin, sa komunidad, ay wala pong trabaho dahil sa pandemic.
Okay, so they started with 2 community farms, but now there are about 5 working farms around the area. The Tanimang Bayan, our community farm, is very important to the community because the price of food like fruits and vegetables in the market have gone up, and most of the residents cannot afford to buy for their families because most of them have lost their jobs and livelihood because of the current pandemic.
Kaya laki talaga po ng pasasalamat namin at ng komunidad at nagkaroon ng Tanimang Bayan dito sa Sitio San Roque. Ang higit po talaga na kailangan namin ay ang lupa dahil pinagdadamutan po talaga kami ng ayala at soler. Asukal naman po para sa aming pataba at materyales para po sa garden.
That is why they are very thankful for the community farm. And right now, they are saying that what they really need to continue developing the farms is fertile soil. Because they cannot acquire soil from the community because both private corporations like Ayala and Soler surrounding the community are preventing them from cultivating their own soil. They are also in need of gardening tools to distribute to the assigned community farmers, as well as resources like sugar, which they primarily use to make fertilizers.
Ang taniman po kasi para sa amin ay hindi lamang pandagdag at pangkukunan ng pagkain, kundi ito ay pangbubuklod sa mga residente at nagsilbing forma ng pag-iit namin ng aming karapatan at espasyo sa komunidad sa kabila ng tuloy na pag-iisyon.
Thank you. For them, the community farms are not just their source of food, but also a symbol of community solidarity in their continuous fight for space and their rights in the city amidst the never-ending threat of demolitions.
Thank you po.
Salamat, Ate Jeline. And now to share about their other community project, Eskwela Maralita. Ate Honesty Fialdin will talk about the project Eskwela Maralita. Ate Honesty.
Hi po, good morning po. Ikaw yun. Ang epekto po ng pandemya sa mga estudyante po ay sobrang nahihirapan at higit sa lahat po wala po silang natutunan gawa nga po nung kawalan po ng gadgets.
Hello. The struggle of students' education, especially during the pandemic, is quite evident. Apart from the lack of proper educational methods, there's also the lack of gadgets.
Walang private place po para sa mga nag-online, kaya hindi din po makapag-focus or makakonsentrate po ang mga bata sa kanilang pag-aaral.
The students right now.
Hindi po tulad ng sa school na tanging sila lang po ang pinupukusan ng mga teachers at kung may mga tanong po sila ay may mga sasagot po.
The students right now, especially in online classes, are having struggles with finding private spaces to focus more on their education. This is in comparison when they're in face-to-face classes where the teachers are more focused in the learning activities as well as the students in engaging with their classes.
Ang epekto po nito sa mga nanay ay unang-una po, kabawasan po sa oras sa mga gawaing bahay. At higit po sa lahat, hindi po lahat ng mga nanay po nakapagtapos or nakalabel po ang tinapos ng pag-aaral sa kung anong grade po ang kanilang mga anak po.
Because of this, the responsibility in the household for mothers especially is divided between normal household work as well as teaching and assisting their students and their kids. However, because of the current lack of or the limited educational completion of these mothers in the community, some of their assistance to their students is a bit lacking.
Kaya po nagtayo po kami ng Eskwela Maralita dahil po sa palpak na programa ng online learning ngayong pandemya. Pero hindi lang po ngayong pandemya pinagkaitan ng edukasyon ang mga maralita. Napakarami pong out of school youth ang hindi nakapagpatuloy o nahinto dahil po sa kahirapan.
This is why the mothers and the volunteers of San Roque have introduced the Escuela Maralita program. But it must be noted that even before the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, the number of out-of-school youth present in the country is already at a stalking number due to poverty and other social matters.
Kaya po ang panawagan po namin dito sa komunidad ng Sitio San Roque po ay di kalidad at accessible na edukasyon po para sa lahat. Salamat.
This is why in the community of San Roque and two other areas in the Philippines, the Filipinos are calling for genuine and accessible forms of education, and one that is open to all and that could be accessed by almost everyone. Thank you daw po.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Honesty and Patricia, na our translator. So for us to see more of the Tanimang Bayan and other situations on Sitio San Roque, here's a short video.
Hi everyone. We attempted to make it possible to show everyone the garden live, but because of it rained last night, it rained and it's not possible to operate on site. So since we have LAWAN Productions has been kind enough to allow us to show you the video. Let's use this as an alternative.
Hindi maagaw ng damo yung vitamina na nakukuha ng dito na galing sa lupa, yung vitamins ng lupa, hindi makukuha ng sinagado. Para sa mga tanim na pupunta yung vitamina ng lupa. Tsaka, hindi lang yun, ano rin po yan, para maging malinis, tignan yung taniman na hindi marumi, dapat parang maganda tignan, maliwalas tignan, dapat puro taniman na andyan sa lupa, walang mga dami. Okra, may talong, ayan yung patula, papaya, may kamatis siya, may luya, then yan, talbos ng kamote. Sa kabilang flat, ano yun? May bawang kami doon. May bawang, may pichay, sili, malunggay, tapos may sitaw din doon na ilan lang, upo. Meron. Kalabasa, meron ako doon nilagay na kalabasa bagong Pero pagkakaisahan pa ito bago kung ano yung dapat itanim pa dito, pagkakaisahan pa, magmi-meeting pa mga task force para maayos ang ang pamamaraan sa pagtatanim. Yung mabilisan lang naman ang itinatanim namin dito Yung mabilisang lumaki para mapakinabangan agad ng mga tao. Dahil nga, alam niyo naman sa panahon ngayon, pandemic, kailangan natin na matugunan yung na punuan sa panahon ng tagutom. Na kaagad, solusyonan. Kasi ang mahal ng bilihin ngayon sa palengke, mga gulay. Kaya minsan nakikaraos din mga membro na nauuta na
So here in the
for it
Philippines,
to enter our body. No offense sa mga vaccine, pero yung
okay, so here in the Philippines, I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys in other countries, but we call the people who are planting plantito and plantita, and San Roque community took plantito and plantita to the next level. And to update us on the situation of the community, Ate Mira Fesiduko will speak for us. Ate Mira Fe.
Sibuko. Magandang umaga po sa lahat. Ako po si Fe. Dito ang kalagayan po. Ang kalagayan po namin dito sa kasalukuyan dito sa Sitio San Roque po ay mahirap po. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang takot demolition. Ibig pong sabihin, kagustuhan, yung takot demolition po, yung gusto ng developer para hindi po yung forced demolition.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ate Fe. The current situation here in the Sitio San Roque is very difficult. There are still ongoing pocket demolitions even with the pandemic. It's what the developers want, so it's not seen as a forced demolition.
Tapos, yung pagbabakod po nila, tuloy-tuloy pa rin po at ang kaya po ang mga tao dito, yung mga may relokasyon na sa malayo man o sa malapit, paparelocate na lang kasi sinasabi po ng mga developer, Ayala Soler, at saka yung NHA po, na isang ahensya pa rin ng gobyerno, sila po ay tinatakot nila yung mga tao na may relokasyon na ayaw pang lumipat. Sinasabihan, pag hindi kayo lumipat, wala na po kayong kabahay.
They're continuing with putting up fences everywhere, and a lot of people are forced to leave because the National Housing Authority and developers like Ayala Soler would tell us that we wouldn't be able to avail of their housing program if we were to stay here. But for people who are unaware of the reality of off-site relocation, they're gonna grab that opportunity.
Tapos po, binabakuran po kami doon, lalong-lalo na po sa Area J, kung saan kasalukuyan pong tinatayo yung construction ng Soler na casino. At hindi lang din po Soler ang nagpapatayo doon sa amin, pati din po Ayala. At nakabakod po kami, sa loob na po kami ng bakod, para na po kami mga baboy na kinukulong doon. At malapit po kami sa construction area, nilalapit po talaga nila kami sa danger zone.
Here in Area J, where we currently reside, it appears to be barely humane as they've put up fences everywhere, as if we're in a pigsty. Our houses are inside those fences, near the construction site of Soler and Ayala, putting us in danger zones.
At sa katulad po kagabi, malakas po yung ulan, binaha po kami doon dahil po sa daluyan ng tubig, wala na po talagang maayos na daluyan ng tubig papunta sa sapa po. Kaya kunting ulan lang po ay binabaha. Ngayon po sana po hindi naman umulan kasi puyat po talaga ako dahil sa paglilima sa bahay namin. At sa hindi lang po ako ang binabaha doon. Lahat po kami na nandoon po sa paligid ng construction na wala na pong maayos na daluyan ng tubig ay binabaha po.
Like with what I experienced last night, there was a flooding because there was no proper water runoff, and all of those people that are residing within the construction site are affected by this.
At hinaharas din po kami ng mga gwardiya. Kunting ano lang po, magpapatayo, halimbawa magtitinda ka lang na sa tabi lang naman, ang gusto po nila tanggalin at alisin po yung tindahan. At marami po sila, minsan nagtatawag pa sila ng mga kapulisan. Nung nakaraang August 1 po ay marami pong pulis na pumunta dahil ano lang naman po kami na nag-ingay, kumbaga nagkalampag dahil magla-lockdown, nangangalampag po kami. Tawag agad sila ng mga kapulisan at marami naman pong pulis at militar talaga dito sa loob ng aming komunidad.
The community members who were putting up vending stalls were stopped by the developers, and they even called the police to remove our vending areas. And in the case of August 1, where we gathered to call for help because of the impeding lockdown, they red tagged us and wanted to stop us, even though we're just asserting our right for vending and for having enough money or help from the government to sustain our families during the lockdown.
At marami rin pong, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, pumapasok din po talaga dito ang pulis at militar, may mga kasamang mga tanod, barangay tanod, na nanguhuli po sila ng mga walang mask. Ang sa amin naman po, okay naman po yun. Kaso lang, pag halimbawa nakita nila yung isang tao na walang mask, dapat naman sana, warning lang po muna. Hindi po, ang ginagawa po nila, tinitikitan nila, first offense po yun, 300. Pag halimbawa, mahuli ka ulit, hindi na lang po 300 ang ibabayad, kundi pataas po ng pataas. Sa akin po,
there are a lot of police and barangay tanods or barangay police officers that patrols people who aren't wearing masks, and they're asking for fines of 300 pesos or equivalent to about $6 US. And it gets bigger in second or third offenses. It's possible for them to give them a warning before fining someone who they see not wearing a mask, but that never happens. A lot of people can't afford it, especially now that we're in a pandemic. So why shouldn't they just give masks instead of fining us?
at sa ngayon po, parang nag-dismoral na po ang mga tao dahil sa tuloy-tuloy po talaga yung sinasabi ko kaninang pocket demolition at bumababa po yung mga benta ng mga vendors kasi po unti-unti pong nawawala ang mga tao dito sa San Roque. Yung pong kabuhayan ay pababa po ng pababa ang kita at nade-dismoral po talaga ang mga tao dito sa San Roque.
There are a lot of demoralization here in the community, and the decreasing number of households lead to a gradually declining revenue for the vendors. The construction of both developers is still ongoing, that of Ayala and Soler.
At meron po kaming tinatawag po na CDP o Community Development. Yun po yung aming pabahay po na establish po, kumbaga, hindi po yan plano ng kung sino-sino man. Plano po ng mga taga-komunidad. Kami po ang nagpaplano ng aming pabahay kung anong sukat o anong laki ng aming pabahay na yun po ay pinupost namin sa government o sa gobyerno na tulungan nila kami na maipatayo po yung aming CDP. Yun po yung Community Development Plan po.
We have what we call a community development plan, or a people's proposal that aims to establish or plan these houses according to what the community needs. And we aim for a mutual development wherein everyone is included.
Yung CDP po yung counter proposal ng kung saan yung sinasabi nila yung people's plan. Yung magkaiba po kasi yung people's plan at saka CDP kasi sa people's plan lang po yun. Pero hindi, sa totoo lang po, hindi po taong nagpaplano doon. Yung CDP po, kami po mismo mga taga-sitio San Roque, ang mga naninirahan dito sa paplano sa bahay na kung saan on-site, ibig sabihin po dito lang po sa komunidad, nag-ipatayo yung aming CDP.
The CDP is different from people's plan per se, because it's the community itself that plans for the housing that we want, and we want for it to be on site here in Sitio San Roque.
Saka yung CDP po ay the same thing, abot kayang pangmasang pabahay. Ibig sabihin, para sa lahat. No? Yung kaya, hulugan, o kung alin yung sa kakayanan, halimbawa, kung magkano pong kinikita, buwan-buwan, yun po yung dapat na ihulog. Labas na po yung sa kung halimbawa, kumikita ka ng 10,000 monthly, ilabas mo na po yung pagkain, gamot, kung magkano pong matira doon, yun po ang dapat ihulog namin doon sa pabahay na aming gusto.
We want the housing to be as simple and affordable and based on the ability. If, for example, someone is earning 10,000 monthly, whatever it is that they spend for necessities, utilities, and whatever is left for that should be what they would pay or pay for the housing included in the CDP.
Kaya po sabi nila kaunlaran, kaya po dinidevelop nila ang San Roque kasi ang gusto po nila kaunlaran. Pero ang kaunlaran po sinasabi nila ay hindi po kami kasama sa kaunlaran. Ang gusto po namin, ang kaunlaran para sa lahat, hindi lang po sa ilan. Sana kasama kami sa kaunlaran na sinasabi nila. Kasi nung mga ilang nakaraang mga taon-taon pa ng mga lumipas, ang San Roque po ay talahiban, damuhan pa po, mga kangkungan. Hindi po ito pinapansin ng mga developer. Katulad ng Ayala at Soler.
Their development are marketed as development only for them. It's not beneficial in any way or not includes the community. The community is what's behind the real development of San Roque. We were the ones who transformed it from a swampy meadow to what it is now. Capitalists saw no value in it until the community built it and made it thrive. Until now, there are harassments and threats from them.
Ngayon, napaunlad na po namin ang San Roque, napaayos, nung makita na ng mga developer na maganda na po ang San Roque, saka po sila pamasok at pinapalayas po nila kami dito. Dapat tayuan nila kami ng pabahay na abot ka mismo din dito sa loob ng San Roque kasi isasama nila kami sa kaunlaran, hindi yung sila lang umunlad. May mga pundo nga silang pinatatayo dyan, hindi naman po namin kayang bayaran yung pundong sinasabi nila. Katulad po namin mga maralita, hindi po talaga namin kayang bayaran yung pinapatayo nilang pundo.
Once they saw that the community thrived based on what the community has built up in the city, they saw interest in it, and now they're striving to force us out of this community, to enforce their kind of development. They should include us in the development as well and strive for it to be beneficial for everyone, because we don't really have the capacity to rent or have enough money to afford their housing projects, let alone if these houses would serve as the same opportunity as the city gives us.
Sana po tulungan nila kami na matupad po yung community development na on-site development o pabahay na nandito sa loob lang po ng Sitio San Roque. Yan lang po at maraming salamat po.
I hope they would help us establish the community development plan that we're proposing. That is all, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ate Mirafe. So now we are going to proceed to the open forum. Some of you already set your questions in the email during the registration period. So now I'm going to read some of the questions, but I believe some were already answered during the discussion of Ate Honesty, Mirafe, and Jeline. So we'll proceed to the some of the questions that are kinda needs more clarification. So from Nikki, how are the initiatives sustained So, mga ate, paano daw po na susustentuhan yung proyekto?
Paano daw nasusustain?
Paano na nagpapatuloy yung proyekto? Halimbawa, kung meron
Paano
ba
nyo
kayong mga
nasusustain yung mga projects nyo sa community?
Dahil po sa mga rekurso at pagtutulungan dito po sa loob ng Sitio San Roque.
Hello, translator.
Sorry, can you, Tijeline, can you repeat that again? I wasn't able to get. Hindi ko po nakuha yung sagot ninyo.
Dahil po sa rekurso at pagtutulungan po sa loob na dito sa mismo sa loob ng mga tao dito sa community.
Okay, we're able to do that mainly through solidarity and collective action in the community.
Yung rekurso po kasi galing po yun sa mga mga donasyon na tumutulong po daan po sa Save San Roque Alliance.
The resources that we gather are mainly from sponsors and partners that are helping us outside of the community. And everything is equally distributed within the residents and the members of those working in the community garden or community farms.
Pero yung mga donasyon po kasi nauubos eh. Pero yung pagtutulungan at pagkakaisa po ng mga tao dito sa sitio sa loob ng komunidad, hindi po yun nauubos.
The donations may falter and may stop arriving, but the spirit of the community in collective action in making sure that the community farms are going is very adamant, very important in the continuity of the farms.
Sana po tuloy-tuloy po yung mga donasyon. Sa gusto pong mag-donasyon, open po ang Save San Roque Alliance at pakibisita lamang po ang kanilang Facebook page at Twitter. Thank you po. Bye.
So if anyone is interested in helping or supporting the community farms, you can reach out to Save San Roque Alliances through their social media channels.
Ate, may tanong pa dito. Sabi ni Isaiah, can the community garden be duplicated? Pwede daw bang gayahin yung community garden sa ibang lugar?
Opo, pwede po. Marami na pong gumaya. Hindi lang po kami dito sa loob ng komunidad. Sa ibang komunidad po, meron na rin po silang mga mga community garden. Katulad po sa barangay proper ng Pag-asa. Ginaya po nila ang aming community garden. Kaso lang pa yan.
Actually, the community gardens that started in Sitio San Roque has already been duplicated in several other communities outside Sitio San Roque, and definitely it can be replicated and taken the best how do you say this? The best practices to input it in their own community gardens.
Okay. Siguro maybe we can have 3 more questions. Ate, 3 tanong pa. So may isa pang tanong dito. Where do they sell the produce? Binibenta nyo ba? Saan nyo binibenta yung yung na farm?
Hindi po namin binibinta, kundi hinahati-hati po namin. Hindi po lamang kami nasa loob ng organisasyon, kundi lahat po ng mga tao dito sa komunidad, binibigyan po namin. Kasi po, para ma-encourage din po silang magtanim. Ganun po.
Okay, so the harvest from the community garden is not being sold. It is actually produced to be distributed to the members of the organization and also the other members of the community of Sitio San Roque. So they distribute the harvest to everyone here in the community. So even though they're not a member, so that they are also encouraged to join the community garden and build up their own garden in their chapters.
Um, another question. What started the garden and when was it established? How has it been maintained and what are the long-term goals of the community garden? What were the initial responses from community about the garden? So mga ate, kailan daw nagsimula yung garden? Tapos ano yung dahilan bakit siya nagsimula? Tapos ano daw yung plano nyo sa, kumbaga sa mahabang panahon, ano ba yung plano ng garden? Tsaka ano yung pangunang response, yung unang reaction ng community nung nagtayo kayo ng garden?
Nagsimula po ang aming garden nung unang bagsak ng pandemya. Kasi meron po kasi kami programang Kusinang Bayan. So program kami ng Tanimang Bayan para doon kami kukuha ng pang-sustento sa Kusinang Bayan.
So the community garden started at the onset of the pandemic. So it was started to support the sustenance of our community kitchen. So the community garden supports the other program of Sitio San Roque, which is the community kitchen that feeds the members of the community here.
Another question, is there a threat of the gardens being destroyed? Meron ba ating parang nanganganib ba na masira yung mga garden? Or meron bang nagtatangkang sirain yung mga garden?
Dahil po sa yung mga hayop, minsan mga aso pumapasok sa garden namin pag hindi po nasarado yung kanyang gate. Kasi binilan po kasi namin yun ng screen, binabakuran po namin ng screen. Kaso minsan po kasi hindi nasasarado.
So it's usually the dogs around in the area that enters the garden. We built a net, a fence around the garden, but sometimes it is forgotten to be closed. So sometimes dogs enter and thrash the garden.
Siguro ate, follow up doon. Halimbawa yung mga developer dun sa paligid, how about the developers around you? Are you being threatened by for example, Ayala Land and those private companies na tinatakot ba nila kayo na sisirain nila yung garden nyo? May ganun ba?
Ay, nung una po, ayaw po nila kasi kaming anuhin ng garden doon. Dahil yung area po kasi na gagawin naming garden, gagawin daw po kasing daanan.
At first, they don't want us to build the garden, but because they want to use the land as part of the road to their establishments.
Tapos, nego lang po kami ng nego hanggang sa nakuha din po namin. Tapos, nanghingi kami ng lupa sa kanila. Binagbigyan naman kami, pero hindi sapat. Hindi sapat yung lupa na binigay nila hanggang sa pinagbawalan po nila kaming kumuha ng lupa.
So, we just continued on negotiating with them until they eventually agree to use some parts of the land. We usually ask for soil from other areas, but they don't want to give us. And until recently, they don't want again. They do not allow again to build the garden.
Pero nung nakita nila na napakaganda na ng aming garden at marami nang nakikinabang, nanghihingi po sila ng aming mga tanim. Yun po.
Eventually, when they saw the garden flourishing, some members of the security forces, the guards, they asked for some of the harvest like pechay, mustard, mustasa, Chinese cabbage, other vegetables that were grown in the garden.
I guess final question, has the barangay stepped up in any way to support the farms even as it gives little aid each month? Tumulong ba yung barangay na dun sa mga farm ninyo Kung
Wala,
binibigyan ng suporta.
wala po kaming natanggap na tulong galing po talaga sa barangay. Opo, puri lang po ng puri yung ginagawa nila. Ganda daw ng garden namin. Kahit po yung City Hall, si Mayor, nagagandahan lang po siya. Hanggang sa nagagandahan na po siya sa garden namin. Pero wala po silang na-donate. Kundi galing po talaga yun sa funds na mga donation sa rekurso po na binibigay sa Save San Roque Alliance. Doon po kami kumukuha ng
The local government, the barangay and the city level, they just give us praises, but there's no really material donations. All donations were coming from the volunteers of Save San Roque Alliance.
Okay. So I guess, Ate, this is the really, final question. Really final question from the audience because questions keep on coming. The people are very curious about the project. So, Bob, would you like to ask the question personally? Turn on your video and your microphone.
Hello po. My question is, tumutulong po ba ang mga lokal na simbahan sa inyong mga proyekto? Have local churches helped your projects?
Dati po, tumutulong po sila sa pamimigay ng seeds po.
The local churches help in giving seeds.
Okay. And I guess finally, can you please refresh us? Ate, pwede bang yung i-refresh nyo kami na saan pwede mag-donate? Paano makakatulong yung mga tao?
Sa gusto pong magbigay ng donasyon, pakibisita lamang po yung Facebook page ng Save San Roque Alliance at saka yung Twitter po. Yun. Ng Save San Roque Alliance. Kailangan po namin ng buto or seeds at saka lupa po talaga. Kailangan namin para mapa-expand pa po namin ang aming tanimang bayan. Salamat po.
You can visit the Facebook page and the Twitter of Save San Roque Alliance. I think one of our member volunteers posted it in the chat. Most of the needs for the community garden, seeds and soil for planting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Salamat mga ate. So since Bobby Halili is here, I think you have an announcement from the attendees, the US attendees, Bobby.
Yes, thank you. Two short announcements. One is because I know one of the speakers earlier, Casey from Even, said that one of the factors that has a positive effect on projects like TANIMANG BAYAN is governance. I just wanted to announce that even though the Philippine elections of 2022 will not happen till May next year, the last day to register as a dual citizen voter in that coming elections is the end of September. So for those who are stateside right now and you are a dual citizen, the last day to register for that very significant Philippine elections next year is the end of this month in September. So that's one. And the second public service announcement is for those who are in California attending right now, please remember that there is also a California recall election come September 14, and if you are a registered voter, please don't forget to vote on September 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. So register to vote. The election is nearing, and of course, to also help our, the country in general, we have to vote wherever you are, even if in the Philippines or abroad. So this is the first of hopefully many episodes of our virtual solidarity tours. This is a project from the People Solidarity and Education Tours and National Alliance of Filipino Concerns. And to close our program, I mean to give us a solidarity message, here's Kirby Arroyo from NAFCON, Coordinator for Culture and Heritage Pillar, National Alliance of Filipino Concerns. Kirby, your mic is on mute, I think.
There we go. Yan. Extension na. Pek. Maraming salamat. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat sa Pilipinas. At good evening naman po sa lahat to all joining us from the US, dito sa US. Ako po si Kirby Arroyo mula sa NAFCON, o National Alliance for Filipino Concerns. Kami po nagpapasalamat sa lahat ng mga nakilahok sa ating paunang virtual Solidarity Tours in partnership with the People's Solidarity and Education Tours, or PSET, Ibon Foundation, Kadamay, at ang Save San Roque Alliance. Thank you everyone for taking the time to learn more about the general situation in the Philippines and for your show of solidarity. Isang taus-pusong pasasalamat po sa ating mga kababayan sa San Roque. Maraming salamat po sa pagbabahagi ng inyong karanasan. Maraming salamat kina Ate Jeline, kina Ate Mirafe, kina Ate Honesty, at sa buong komunidad ng Sitio San Roque. Maraming salamat po sa pagpapakita sa amin ng inyong dakilang pagkakaisa at pagkilos para sa kapakanan ng ating mamamayan. Gaya ng inyong kusinang bayan, ng inyong tanimang bayan, at higit sa lahat ang inyong nakamamanghang pagbubuklod. Ang inyong pagkakaisa at pagkilos upang tugunan ang pangangailangan ng ating mamamayan ay sadya namang nakakahanga. Naway magsilbi kayong inspirasyon sa milyon-milyon pa nating mga kababayan sa iba't ibang sulok ng mundo mula sa Pilipinas hanggang dito sa Amerika. Hindi may tatanggi na ang bayanihang inyong ipinamala sa isang halimbawa ng tunay na kabayanihan na dapat tularan. Mabuhay po kayo. While we recognize the amazing initiative of the community, we cannot turn a blind eye on the systemic problems that continue to contribute to the worsening conditions in the Philippines. Itong mga nakarang araw lang ay gumulantang sa ating bayan ang mga anomalya sa pondong pandemya na sa halip na ito ay makatulong sa mga nangangailangan ay labis pa itong nagpahirap sa ating mga kababayan. Sa dinami-dami ng mga naghihirap at nagugutom sa ating mga kababayan ay inuna pa nila ang pangungurakot sa kaban ng ating bayan. Halimbawa, ang alumalyang ito ay umabot sa hanggang 68 billion pesos na, isang napakalaking halaga na sana'y inilaan nila sa pagtulong at ayuda. Nariyan din ang 780 million pesos na budget mula sa Department of Social Welfare and Development. Kabilang din sa mga anomalyang ito ang 42 billion pesos na, they were meant for medical supplies, yet to this day, this 42 billion pesos remains undocumented or unaccounted for. It has been over a year since the pandemic started, and at this point, the issue is no longer inefficiency. The inaction and the neglect of the government absolutely should not be minimized to problems of inefficiency or lack of resources. Ang pagpapabaya at pagwawaldas ng pondo ng ating bayan sa gitna ng pandemya ay hindi lamang nakakalungkot, ito talaga namang nakakagalit, pagkat ito kriminal at hindi makatarungan. Ilang libong buhay na nagsakripisyo at milyon-milyon pa ang nakakaranas ng kahirapan. Kailangan po natin mamulat sa realidad at magkaisa para lumawak at lumakas pa ang ating pagkilos at pakikipaglaban para sa kapakanan at kabuhayan ng ating sambayanan. Even overseas, we have an opportunity to be with and take part in the people's movement in the Philippines. Our call to action remains magkaisa at kumilos. Magkaisa to unite at kumilos to take actions. At dapat ngayon na, let us not be idle and wait to seek change. Kami po'y nananawagan na tayo po'y magkaisa at kumilos. Let us bring hope through actions for the Filipino people. We encourage everyone, especially here in the US, to join NAFCON and continue supporting our Bayanihan campaigns here in the US. Our current relief and rehabilitation initiatives are in partnership with organizations in the Philippines, gaya ng Coalition for People's Right to Health, or CPRH, at ang Consortium for People's Development Disaster Response. We encourage folks to support our Bayanihan response, where we aim to sustain community-based health programs, building of water systems, community pantries, and support PPEs and COVID-19 testing for community members. Maraming salamat po sa People's Solidarity and Education Tours for organizing this activity. If you want to continue learning about the situation in the Philippines and learning about the ways in which we can help and support our advocacy efforts, please join us again on September 8th. Please join us on September 18th for the National Summit for Human Rights and Democracy in the Philippines, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific time. If you haven't already, you can register at tinyurl.com/HRD Summit 2021. Across the nation, here in the US, we're seeing hundreds of thousands of our people organize against injustices, just like those back home in the motherland in the Philippines. Our people and land are rich in resources, and we And when we come together, we're stronger as a community, and we're able to make positive changes for each other and for the future generations to come. We must not wait for change to come. We must act and make the changes ourselves to build a better society and a brighter future for our people. We at NAFCON are committed to educating, empowering, and advocating for our communities through various platforms and partnerships. While our current Bayanihan response to COVID-19 seeks to respond to the urgent and long-term needs of impacted Filipino communities in the US and the Philippines, we must also acknowledge and extend the Bayanihan spirit of collective action beyond COVID-19. For over a year, we have been facing this pandemic, but we would be remiss if we don't acknowledge, face, and collectively overcome a greater threat, and that is the epidemic of government corruption, of government inaction and negligence. We must unite and take actions to demand accountability. We encourage everyone to join our Bayanihan efforts in responding to the urgent needs of our communities by becoming an AFCON affiliate if you're in the US, partner or sponsor. Please reach out to us on all our social media platforms, email address, and website to join us in taking collective action and responding to the concerns faced by the Filipino communities, hindi lang dito sa US, kundi maging sa Pilipinas, and in solidarity with all the marginalized communities. We encourage you to make a difference, and we invite you to learn more about what you can do to protect those who are most vulnerable to exploitation. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang sambayanang Pilipino, mabuhay ang Sitio San Roque, at mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you for that, Kirby. Maraming salamat. And to close our program, here's Don Aquino, the coordinator of People Solidarity and Education Tours.
Hello. First, I would like to thank everyone who have joined us for our program today. We would like to thank all our partners. Of course, Save San Roque Alliance, especially their documentation, creatives committees, and the translators for helping us this morning. And San Roque Kadamay Chapter and Kadamay National, and of course our partner NAFCON, and everyone else who participated in this activity. What we have learned from organizing this solidarity tour is that this is indeed a time of uncertainty. Every plans changes, and even for PISET, before the pandemic started, we have a lot of plans for new packages, plans for community tours and solidarity visits, but we have to adapt to what is happening. And efforts like this just proves that through our solidarity and care, understanding, and presence for each other, we are able to move past all the limitations that are being thrown at us. And the virus, the pandemic is just one thing. And as Kirby have said, we also have the different challenges being thrown by our government and other hurdles encountered by our communities. And what we have learned from the experience of San Roque also taught us that standing together and being the solidarity of the people is the only certain in all this uncertainty. With this, we can overcome different challenges, and we can make each other's lives better. So we are hoping that you could join us in our lineup of virtual tours. And we also invite everyone in the US and also those who could watch this here in the Philippines to join PISET, not just as an audience for our SolidariTOURS. You could also be part of the team. And as many have said, parang it's not it's not about the end, it's about the journey. And the journey of preparing for this specific Solidarity Tour has really taught us a lot. So you could also volunteer with us and coordinate with the community and share their stories, immerse and integrate with the community while preparing discussions like this. So that's all. In behalf of PISET and NAFCON, we would like to thank everyone and all who are also watching on Facebook. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don. So, join our community garden, Save San Roque. And to end our program, let us please turn on your camera and if you have calls with you, maybe you can erase them, and then we'll have a very short photo op. Who will take the picture? Don, are you going to take the picture? Our picture?
We will take the picture.
Okay, Mayet will take the picture. Turn on your cameras, please. Ready, Mayet? Ready? All 46 participants, please turn on your camera. Okay, I think most cameras are turned on. Please turn on your camera in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mayat, ready?
Thank you. Ay, sige po, ongoing. Wait lang.
Page ano na Mayet?
Steady lang po.
Countdown for us.
Okay. Second page. Wait lang. Okay, we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Maraming
Thank you
salamat.
to all our visitors, and please keep on supporting San Roque and join us in our next Solidarity Tours. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Salamat po.